Some love stories knock politely, others break in, move the furniture of your morals, and leave the door ajar so the night breeze can keep you awake. And Cintaku Hadir Di Kehidupan Selanjutnya, released in 2025, is that second kind, the kind that says next life and then proves the next life is just the one you choose to live starting today. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel Scenecraft Review, and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. Right from its opening stretch, this film feels like a sleek, late-night bus ride into a city that knows your secrets, smeared neon in the window, a phone that's out of battery, and a name that carries more weight than you expected. And if you're reading that title as My Love Arrives in the Next Life, you're not wrong. But the twist is the film treats reincarnation not as the supernatural but as reinvention, a person shedding an old life, putting on a bolder one, and dealing with the cost of the fit. And at the center of it is Lily Bennett, a woman whose tenderness and backbone share the same pulse, arriving from somewhere off the map into a metropolis that always looks glossy on postcards but grinds in real time, and the way the camera greets her tells you everything, not with triumph, but with that low, practical courage of someone who moves because she has to, not because a spotlight invited her. She comes for her younger sister, Nana, expecting the sweet mess of family, shared meals, catching up, laughter in cramped rooms, and instead collides with an illusion that looks perfect from a distance, Nana living large under Lily's own name, the kind of opulence that smells like new leather and tastes like guilt, and you can practically feel your stomach drop with hers as the film plays it understated, no violin sting, just the scrape of a chair leg and a silent count of what's been taken, what can be forgiven, what must be fought for, and that pivot sets the tone. This isn't a loud melodrama, it's a simmer, a controlled, savory heat that cooks its emotions like a stew, letting the tensions thicken. From here, Lily doesn't turn into a detective or a warrior, she does something harder, she gets a job, and not just any job, but one at a restaurant under the Vuitton Group umbrella, a place that operates with the velocity of an airport and the precision of a watch, because nothing reveals character faster than a dinner rush, and the film knows it, bathing the kitchen in warm, pressurized light so the stainless steel gleams like armor and the sizzle of oil becomes a drumbeat for her new life. While hovering over this world is Eldrick, the sort of supervisor who knows exactly how many seconds a stare should last to make people doubt themselves, a man built of clipped phrases and hard rules, not a mustached-whirling villain, but the embodiment of keep up or go home, and the way he rides Lily from the start is framed without caricature. He's protecting margins, protecting standards, maybe protecting his own precarious status in a company that measures worth by output per minute. It's in this tricky world that Vale Vuitton enters not like a savior, but like a question, the CEO whose name sits heavy on letterhead and whose presence in any room is a narrative event, not because he's flashy, but because the film shoots him with edges and negative space, letting him be a silhouette behind glass before he becomes a voice, then a gaze, and what draws him to Lily is not some slow-mo hair flip, it's competence, restraint, the way she tightens a knot on an apron with the concentration of someone tying down a runaway balloon, and the film is romantic in the old-school sense, it lets a look carry weight that a speech would ruin. Around this triangle of attention, the filmmakers build a texture that feels both specific to a Southeast Asian city, humidity caught in shirt sleeves, flickers of street food stalls after a long shift, a hint of local rhythms pulsing under a string-heavy score, and universal in its emotional architecture, because what's being explored here is identity as currency and love as a truth serum. And every choice about how to light a face or frame a hallway pushes that conversation further. The corporate spaces glow with cool, museum glass tones, while the kitchen is amber and frenetic, and the private rooms, those quiet corners where Lily must decide how much of herself to reveal, are softened with almost pastoral calm, like the film is saying, here, in the breath between noise, is where a person decides who they are. The story paces its revelations with care, it doesn't chuck answers at you because it trusts you to lean in, showing Lily's history in crumbs, a worn-in wallet photo, a phone lock screen you only see for a blink, the kind of details the camera visits but doesn't underline, and when Nana steps into frame, she's not painted as a snake, she's a human with hunger in her eyes, the hunger for safety, for status, for being somebody in a city that treats anonymous people like furniture, and the script gives her small, chillingly honest gestures, a quick retouch of lipstick before a lie, the split second of hesitation before a smile lands, so that when we judge her, we also recognize her, and that's part of what makes this film sting, how it admits that wanting more is human, then asks what's lost when the mask becomes your face. The performances lean on understatement and placement rather than monologues. Lily's strength comes from the way she takes a breath before answering, stealing a fraction of a second to decide if the truth will help or harm. And when she's under Eldrick's gaze, you see that battle between pride and the need to keep this job, a flicker of defiance managed into compliance, but never submission, and Eldrick himself is a study in pressure. His jaw is clenched not just at employees but at spreadsheets, at calls from above, at numbers that don't love him back, and his harshness reads like a man trying to survive inside a machine, which gives the film its moral texture. No one is evil in glow-in-the-dark letters, they're trapped in angles, and the edges cut everybody. Vale, meanwhile, is a different species of power, one that understands optics, one that listens, and the movie uses silence to make him charismatic. He holds a topic in the air like it's delicate, which is a cinematic way of saying, this person has learned to value what is rare, and the rarest thing in his world is someone who doesn't want anything from him except a fair shot, and that's Lily, whether she admits it or not. Her body language insisting on dignity even when the situation erodes it. If you're here for visuals, there's a lot to savor. The way the camera follows a plate from the past to a table, tracking labor as it becomes luxury, the swift cuts between the front of house smile and the back of house sweat, little macro shots of dill fronds, sugar dust, a flame flaring up and dying like a heartbeat, and then, outside, the broader canvas of a city that looks like an X-ray, bones of high-rises visible beneath the soft flesh of night. And the score rides alongside all of this. Like a quiet confidant, strings swelling only when the film's emotional math demands it, percussion tapping like a foot under a table when a lie is told, and now and then a gentle nod to local musical textures that roots the romance in a living place rather than a generic film world. Through it all, the theme of names as passports plays out with elegant restraint. Lily Bennett gets you into rooms, Nana keeps you honest, or doesn't, and the idea that someone could step into your life and wear it like a designer jacket is both outrageous and, in the ecosystem the film builds, terrifyingly plausible, and we start to realize that the next life the title promises might be the identity a person steals, or the identity a person fights to reclaim, or the identity offered by the gaze of someone who sees you clearly for the first time, and that's where Vale's attention becomes catalytic rather than creepy. He's not rescuing her, he's recognizing her. And recognition can be the cleanest kind of romance because it says, I see the person you are when the lights are off. The pacing takes its time, letting us settle into the daily grind, and that's a smart choice because the slow burn makes the eventual confrontations feel earned. You watch Lily's hands get steadier at the grill, her sense of the space get sharper, and you understand that competence is her love language, toward herself, first, and the film respects that by giving her long, unbroken takes where nothing happens except her being brilliant at something she learned yesterday, and those are the quiet fireworks, the kind that make you tear up before you know why, because triumph at that scale always hits if you've ever had to start from zero, while Nana's scenes build a parallel track of escalating stakes, bigger rooms, shinier company, chillier eyes around her, and the cost of sustaining the lie becomes visible in posture, in the way she waits half a beat too long before answering a simple question, as though calculation has replaced instinct. What makes all of this hum is how the film treats work as theater and family as courtroom, the kitchen lines and dining rooms as stages where roles are performed with brutal regularity, while the home spaces, those precious few, are where truth tries to speak and sometimes can't find the words, and there's a ghost in the background of Lily and Nana's story in the form of the woman who raised them, an adoptive mother whose presence drifts into memory sequences like the scent of something cooking in another room, hinting that the axis of truth in this family is off by a few degrees, and whether that axis will be corrected by confession or collision is one of the film's main suspense engines, ticking away behind the romance like a clock you hear only when the music dips. Emotionally, the movie sits in that intimate register where conflict is about who gets to own a moment rather than who gets to throw a punch. You get tiny wins, an apology that lands, a compliment that isn't charged, a ride home that doesn't turn into an interrogation, and then setbacks, the rumor mill grinding, a schedule change that feels vindictive, a dinner where someone smiles and says something that feels like a slap. And in that ebb and flow you feel the film's point, lives are built not in grand gestures but in small, relentless decisions, and love is often just the most beautiful consequence of consistently choosing decency when it costs you, which is why Lily's quiet grace feels like a rebellion and why Vale's attention feels like a refuge rather than a trap. Even the subtext of class is handled with the delicacy of someone slicing sashimi, rather than lecture. The film places contrast side by side, the swish of a chauffeur door versus the squeak of a bus handle, a boardroom's glass table versus a sticky break room bench, and lets the camera do the judging, while the script keeps checking in with the question that hurts the most: if Nana had started with more, would she have wanted less from Lily? And if Lily had less pride, would she have fought so hard to keep her name clean? And the way those questions hang in the air gives the narrative a moral gravity that's rare in romances that move this smoothly. As the early acts unwind, you can feel the filmmakers trusting quiet to carry weight. There's a moment in the kitchen where the clatter stops and you hear only Lily's breath as she centers herself before service, a micro-ritual that mirrors the macro-ritual of her life, and another where Vale pauses on a balcony, eyes on the city, as if counting how many lives are being lived below, how many chances are being taken. And it's that reflective texture that keeps the movie from playing like a simple Cinderella with corporate garnish. Instead, it blooms into a meditation on how we author ourselves, how a person's name can be a story, a boast, a shield, or a prayer, and how love can be the one thing that insists we use our real one. And yes, when Eldrick pushes, the film gets tense enough to make your teeth clench. His authority isn't the cartoon cruelty of a tyrant, it's the bureaucratic coldness that says all people are interchangeable, which is exactly the ideology the movie exists to puncture. And there's a beautiful, blink and you'll miss it moment when even he softens, when his eyes say, just for a second, I remember why I started caring about this craft. And moments like that invite compassion without ever excusing harm, a tonal tightrope that's harder than it looks, kept steady by performances that lean into restraint and by visual choices that keep feet on the ground even when hearts are in orbit. Bit by bit, the narrative threads start to braid, Nana's facade requiring more elaborate maintenance, Lily's world inside Vuitton becoming both sanctuary and battlefield, Vale lurking on the edges of her routine like a thought she keeps trying to ignore, and the film's score and editing sync up into a breath pattern that's weirdly intimate, like being in the room with someone as they decide who they want to be. And by the time Lily's competence and quiet magnetism draw Vale into a direct interaction that isn't mediated by titles or walls, the groundwork has been laid so cleanly that a simple exchange of thanks feels seismic, not because of what is said, but because of the way each of them holds the moment like it might break, a gesture that makes you believe this is a love story built not on fireworks but on gentle gravity, two orbits pulling closer until bumping into each other becomes inevitable. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from losing someone you love, but from walking into a room and realizing someone has been living your life better than you ever got the chance to, smiling with your name on their lips like it belongs to them. And that's the wicked, irresistible hook at the center of Cintaku Hadir Di Kehidupan Selanjutnya, the 2025 drama that opens like a promise of romance and then immediately tightens into a knot of identity, betrayal, and desperate reinvention. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel Scenecraft Review, and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. Now let's sink into what this story is really doing, because on the surface it feels like one of those poor girl meets powerful man melodramas that live and die on coincidence, but the way it frames its emotional damage, the way it lingers on humiliation and tiny acts of dignity, it's aiming for something more intimate. It wants you to feel what it's like to be erased, and then to watch someone rebuild themselves from the inside out while the world keeps trying to shove them back into the shadows. The setup is deceptively simple, and that's exactly why it hits so hard. Lily Bennett travels to the city with that soft, hopeful energy of someone who thinks family is a safe place, like she's arriving with a suitcase full of love and obligation, ready to check in on her younger sister Nana, ready to play the role of the responsible older sibling who shows up even when life is messy. And what she finds is not messy, it's surreal. Nana isn't struggling, Nana isn't scraping by, Nana is living lavishly, and not just living well. She's doing it while pretending to be Lily. And the show doesn't rush past that revelation like it's a plot twist you're supposed to clap at. It lets the moment sit there, ugly and personal, because identity theft in a story like this isn't about documents and signatures, it's about a person stealing the version of you that the world respects. It's a sister wearing your name like a designer coat, walking through doors that would stay locked for you, and the first emotional punch of this series is the way it makes that feel intimate, not abstract. Lily isn't just angry, she's disoriented, because how do you argue with someone who's already convinced everyone else that they're you? How do you prove your own existence when your life has been rewritten in front of an audience that doesn't even know it's watching a performance? What makes Lily compelling right away is that she isn't written as a flawless saint who instantly knows the perfect move. She's written like someone trying to keep her breathing steady while the ground shifts under her feet, and you can feel the embarrassment creeping up her neck in scenes where she's forced to swallow words just to survive the moment. That's the first big theme the story quietly introduces. Sometimes the villain doesn't defeat you with power, they defeat you with social reality, with the fact that other people will believe the person who looks more confident, who wears nicer clothes, who speaks like they belong. Nana's deception isn't just a lie, it's a mirror held up to a world that rewards performance, and the show uses that to create this constant low-level dread, because you sense early on that the lie is going to spread, that it's going to infect more relationships, more opportunities, more people who will look at Lily like she's the imposter in her own story. And then, as if the universe is testing just how much a person can take before they crack, Lily ends up working at a restaurant under the Vuitton Group umbrella, a place that should be a fresh start but quickly becomes its own pressure cooker because the series understands something crucial about humiliation. It doesn't always arrive as a dramatic slap, sometimes it's just relentless, small, daily disrespect that piles up until you forget what it feels like to be treated gently. Eldrick, the figure applying that pressure, is the kind of character you immediately recognize even if you've never met him exactly. He's not simply mean, he's strategic about it. He knows how to corner someone while staying technically within the rules, and the show uses him as this embodiment of institutional cruelty, the kind that can always justify itself. The restaurant setting is smart because it's a place where class divides become physical: who sits and who serves, who is seen and who is invisible, who gets to be adored for spending money and who gets scolded for existing in the wrong way. Lily moving through that space, working, enduring, trying not to be broken by it, becomes its own kind of battlefield, and what I love is that the series doesn't pretend resilience is glamorous. It shows resilience as exhaustion, as patience, as the decision to show up again the next day even when you're being chipped away. There's a raw, human rhythm to the way Lily is written in these early episodes, because she's not chasing revenge like a superhero, she's chasing stability, she's chasing proof that she can still build a life even if someone stole the one she thought she had. And then, right when the story has you locked into that gritty survival mode, it introduces the element that pushes it into full-on romantic melodrama territory. Vale Vuitton, the CEO whose very name carries the weight of money, influence, and the kind of cold polish that can either save you or destroy you depending on how the story chooses to turn. The first thing the series does right with Vale is that it doesn't make him instantly warm. His presence feels like a temperature drop, like the air becomes sharper when he enters, and that matters because in stories like this, the CEO love interest can so easily become a fantasy vending machine, a walking solution to poverty, a rich guy who just happens to be emotionally enlightened. Here, in the beginning at least, Vale is more like a storm you can see coming, powerful, unpredictable, and capable of changing everything about Lily's life without even meaning to. When Lily catches his attention, it isn't framed as she's special because she's cute, it plays more like his noticing a contradiction he can't immediately solve, a worker who doesn't fit the profile of someone who should be quietly obedient, someone carrying a bruise in her eyes while still doing her job with this stubborn, almost infuriating integrity. And that's where the title, Cintaku Hadir Di Kehidupan Selanjutnya, starts to feel less like a literal promise and more like an emotional thesis. Love, in this story, is something that arrives after devastation, like a second life you only access once the first version of you has been burned down. It's not just romance as reward, it's romance as the possibility of being seen correctly, finally, by someone with the power to make the world listen, though of course, the series is too dramatic to make that simple. Because here's the tension that keeps you watching: Lily doesn't just need to be loved, she needs to be restored, and restoration is messy. It requires truth, and truth in a world built on Nana's performance is dangerous. What makes Nana such a fascinating antagonist in these early beats is that the show doesn't paint her as a cartoon monster twirling a mustache, it paints her as someone who has tasted the high of being treated like she matters, and now she's addicted to it. That doesn't excuse what she's doing, but it does make it emotionally legible, and that's important because it means every time Lily and Nana orbit each other, you're not just waiting for an argument, you're watching a collision of wounds. Nana's choices feel like they're fueled by envy and insecurity, yes, but also by a desperate belief that she's entitled to the life she's faking because she's suffered in her own way too. The tragedy is that she's trying to heal herself by hollowing out someone else, and the series knows exactly how uncomfortable that is, because it forces you to ask, How many people do we let reinvent themselves at the expense of others, as long as they look successful doing it? And while all of this is simmering, the show threads in the figure of the adoptive mother, not as a constant presence yet, but as a looming moral gravity, someone who represents the possibility that the truth isn't just a personal weapon, it's a family reckoning. Even early on, you can feel that the story is building toward exposure, toward consequence, toward the moment when the mask can't hold, but it takes its time getting there because it wants you to live in Lily's daily reality first. That pacing choice is risky. Slow burn melodrama can either hypnotize you or frustrate you, and I'll be honest. There are moments where the series leans so hard into the repeated stress of Lily's workplace life that you might feel the urge to shake the screen and say, okay, let her catch a break. But at the same time, that repetition is the point. It's teaching you the texture of her endurance. It's making the eventual shift, when someone finally offers her genuine respect, feel earned rather than convenient. Cinematically, the show plays with contrasts that are simple but effective, the glossy, almost sterile aura around wealth versus the warmer, harsher, more tactile world where Lily actually lives. You can sense it in the way scenes are staged, the distance between people in luxury spaces compared to the closeness, the noise, the lack of privacy in working spaces. Even without flashy filmmaking tricks, the atmosphere does emotional work, and the soundtrack choices, those swelling cues that arrive right when Lily is trying not to cry, those quieter stretches where you just hear the room breathe, are clearly designed to make you feel like you're inside her chest. And that's really the core of why this series is watchable. Even when it's making you suffer a little, it's not just telling you what happened, it's inviting you to sit in the feelings that come with it. Lily's dignity becomes the emotional anchor because she's constantly being tested in ways that would make most people lash out, and instead, she's learning how to choose her battles, how to keep her head down without losing her self-respect entirely. There's a moment early on, one of those scenes that could seem small if you're half watching, where Lily is forced to take criticism that isn't fair, and you see her swallow it, not because she agrees, but because she understands the world she's in, and the camera or the writing, it doesn't treat that as weakness, it treats it as strategy, as survival intelligence. That's a surprisingly mature touch for a story that also wants to give you romantic sparks and dramatic reveals. And about those sparks, Vale's attention is like a match held near gasoline, because it introduces possibility, and possibility is dangerous when your life is already unstable. If Vale starts seeing Lily, really seeing her, that threatens Nana's entire con, because the lie works best in a world where powerful people never look too closely at the ones serving them. The series quietly sets up this idea that the truth isn't just a confession waiting to happen, it's a disruption of a social order, and that's why Eldrick matters too, because characters like him are the gatekeepers of that order, the ones who keep the right people on top by making sure the wrong people stay in their place. So when Lily begins to stand out, even unintentionally, it creates friction, and you can feel the story tightening its grip. Nana is playing dress-up with Lily's identity, Lily is trying to survive under pressure, Vale is noticing her in a way that could either be salvation or another form of control, and hanging over everything is the question of when the lie will snap and who will be crushed when it does. What I find especially intriguing is how the show toys with the viewer's hunger for justice. You want Nana to be exposed, you want Lily to be vindicated, you want the world to finally look at Lily and say, we were wrong. But the series is smart enough to understand that vindication doesn't always heal the damage, sometimes it just changes the kind of pain you're carrying. And that's why those early emotional beats matter so much, because they're laying the groundwork for what happy could even mean at the end of a story like this. Is happiness Lily reclaiming her name publicly? Is it Lily becoming someone new entirely? Is it romance, or is romance just one piece of a larger recovery? The show doesn't answer that immediately, and instead it keeps you walking with Lily through this city that feels both exciting and predatory, watching her learn the rules, watching her discover which parts of herself are unbreakable and which parts are still bleeding, and right as Vale's interest starts to shift from curiosity to something more personal, right as Lily begins to sense that the world might finally be offering her a door instead of a wall, the series pivots into a more dangerous kind of intimacy where attention stops being flattering and starts becoming a test of trust. And that's where the romance in this story stops being a sugary fantasy and starts feeling like a wire you're walking across, because when someone like Vale Vuitton turns his gaze on you, it isn't just wow the CEO likes her, it's a spotlight, and spotlights reveal bruises you've been hiding and attract people who want to pull you back into the dark. The series handles their early dynamic with this delicious imbalance. Vale doesn't chase Lily with clumsy compliments, he studies her, and the tension comes from how unfamiliar it is for Lily to be studied without being judged. In the restaurant, she's used to eyes that look past her, or eyes that look down on her, but Vale's attention is different, it's quiet, it's deliberate, and because he's a man whose words can rearrange the world around him, every short exchange carries this sense that Lily could lose control of her life again, even if the thing taking control looks like romance. There's a scene that really captures that energy, where Lily is doing something ordinary, working, cleaning up, moving like she's trying to be smaller than the room, and Vale enters the space like he owns the air, and instead of humiliating her, he asks a question that's almost gentle. Almost. The show makes a meal out of that almost, because Lily has learned the hard way that gentleness can be a trap, and you can hear it in the way she answers him, respectful but guarded, like she's holding her own heart behind her back. Eldrick, of course, feels that shift instantly, because guys like Eldrick can sense when a hierarchy is wobbling, and the cruelty escalates in that painfully believable way where it's never one big incident you can report, it's 1,000 little cuts designed to make you quit on your own. He overloads her, he corners her with blame when mistakes happen, he sets her up to look incompetent, and the show's writing here is quietly rage-inducing because it understands workplace abuse isn't always loud, it's administrative. It's following procedure as a weapon. And Lily's response isn't to become superhuman, she becomes careful. She documents, she watches, she learns who is safe and who is not, and that slow learning process is one of the most satisfying undercurrents in the series because it's about her rebuilding agency. Meanwhile, Nana's lie keeps blooming in the background like mold. At first it's just outfits and introductions, but then it starts to shape relationships, opportunities, status. You can feel the story widening out to show the city as this stage where Nana performs Lily for wealthy circles, and the series leans into how intoxicating that is for her. The compliments, the doors opened, the way people laugh a little too hard at her jokes because they think she's important. It's sickening, but it's also psychologically sharp, because it shows you how someone can start with a lie and then build a personality around it until they don't know where the truth ends anymore. And the real tension is that Nana's performance isn't happening in isolation, her version of Lily is starting to drift toward the Vuitton orbit, which is exactly the kind of collision that makes melodrama explode. The show is careful not to make Lily and Nana's conflict purely external, either. Lily isn't just fighting a sister, she's fighting the internal voice that wonders if maybe Nana is right to take what she took, because what has Lily's real identity ever gotten her besides struggle? That's a brutal question for a protagonist to carry, and it makes Lily's small choices, when she decides not to lie, when she refuses to grovel, when she stands up for herself in tiny ways, feel like moral victories, not just plot beats. Vale's role in all this stays intriguingly ambiguous. He's drawn to Lily, yes, but he's also a CEO, which means he's not free from suspicion. The show toys with the possibility that his interest could be another form of entitlement, another rich man fascinated by a different girl because she's a novelty. And Lily senses that too. She's not written as naive, she's written as someone who knows that powerful men can be kind and dangerous in the same breath. So when Vale begins to offer her little lifelines, an easier shift, a chance to speak, a moment of protection from Eldrick, it doesn't land as a fairy godmother moment. It lands as a complicated bargain, take the help and risk being seen as favored, refuse the help and keep bleeding alone. There's a scene where Eldrick tries to publicly shame Lily in front of co-workers, and you can almost taste the humiliation, that heat behind the eyes, that urge to disappear. Vale intervenes, but not with a dramatic outburst, he does it with calm authority, the kind that makes everyone else suddenly remember they have manners. And the aftermath is what matters. Lily isn't purely grateful. She's shaken, because being defended feels good, but it also paints a target on her back. The show understands that survival in hostile spaces often depends on invisibility, and the moment Lily becomes visible, the rules change. Visually, the series starts using that idea too. In early episodes, Lily is often framed at the edge of shots, partially blocked, shot through doorways or between objects like the world is constantly putting something between her and the camera. As Vale's attention grows, the framing subtly shifts, Lily gets centered more often, the lens lingers on her reactions, not just her actions. It's not flashy cinematography, but it's purposeful, and it feeds the emotional story. She's being recognized, and recognition is both healing and terrifying. Nana, on the other hand, is filmed like someone in control of her own spotlight, clean compositions, confident movement, the kind of presentation that screams, "This is who you're supposed to admire." It's a clever visual contrast because it shows how easily the world can mistake Polish for truth. And then there's the sound design, which leans into the emotional whiplash of Lily's life. In the restaurant, the noise is constant, clinking, chatter, orders being called, like the world won't let her have a quiet thought. In Nana's luxury scenes, the silence is almost obscene, broken only by soft music or the click of heels, which makes the lie feel like it's happening in a vacuum where consequences don't exist. The score does this thing where it doesn't always swell when romance shows up, sometimes it goes quiet instead, letting you sit in the awkwardness of tenderness when you're not used to it. That choice makes Vale and Lily's moments feel less like destiny and more like risk, like two people reaching for each other without knowing what they'll touch. And Vale, as a character, starts to reveal little cracks in the CEO mask. You get brief glimpses of why he's so controlled, why his warmth feels rationed. The series hints that he's spent his life being surrounded by people who want something from him, which means sincerity has become a rare currency, and Lily, because she's not trying to climb him like a ladder, confuses him in a way that feels believable. But the show refuses to make him a savior without cost. His presence creates complications for Lily at work, and the power imbalance is never fully erased. Even when he's kind, he's still a man who can change her future with a sentence, and that truth hangs over every interaction like a shadow you can't step out of. That's part of what makes their chemistry interesting. It's not just flirtation, it's negotiation. Lily is constantly deciding how much of herself to reveal, and Vale is constantly deciding whether he's capable of loving someone without owning the situation. While all that slow burn tension is building, Nana's storyline tightens into something more volatile. The lie starts demanding maintenance. People ask questions. Stories have to match. Nana begins to make sharper choices to protect her performance, and the series shows the ugliness of that spiral, how one lie forces another, how fear turns into aggression. And because Nana is pretending to be Lily, the damage isn't confined to Nana's life, it starts to contaminate Lily's actual relationships, her potential connections. There's this gut punch of a moment where Lily catches wind of something Nana has done under her name, and you see Lily's face register the realization that she could be punished for a crime she didn't commit, not by law necessarily, but by reputation, which in these stories is almost worse. Reputation is social death, and the show plays with that fear relentlessly. It's not just, will Lily get exposed as the real Lily? It's, will Lily be forced to carry Nana's sins because the world doesn't care who's telling the truth as long as the narrative stays convenient? That's where the adoptive mother starts to feel like a fuse waiting to be lit. The series introduces her influence like a steady drumbeat, phone calls, mentions, the sense that she knows her daughters in ways they don't fully appreciate. And when she begins to suspect something is off, the story shifts into this delicious investigative tension, not in a detective show way, but in a family drama way where investigation means emotional observation. She notices inconsistencies in Nana's behavior, details that don't fit, a sudden sophistication that looks too practiced. And what makes that thread powerful is that it's not just about catching Nana, it's about a parent realizing a child is becoming someone she doesn't recognize. That's tragedy, too. The series keeps layering these emotional truths so that even as you're rooting for Lily to reclaim her identity, you're also watching how the lie has its own gravity, pulling everyone into moral compromise. One of the most quietly devastating aspects of Lily's arc here is how she internalizes the idea that she has to earn basic kindness. You see it when she's surprised by small decencies, a coworker offering help, a customer treating her like a human, Vale remembering something she said. The show makes those moments land like shockwaves because for Lily, kindness is not normal, it's rare. And when you've lived like that, love is dangerous because you can mistake relief for devotion. The writing flirts with that line, is Lily falling for Vale because of who he is, or because he's the first person with power who doesn't immediately use it to crush her? And Vale's own arc teases a similar question, is he drawn to Lily because she's authentic, or because she represents an escape from his curated world? The best romances are the ones that make you uneasy even as they make you swoon, and this one has that uneasy quality because it's rooted in trauma and inequality, not just chemistry. Still, when the show lets them breathe, it can be genuinely tender. There's a softness in certain scenes where Lily allows herself to laugh, and it's almost startling because the series has trained you to expect pain. That smart emotional pacing, it gives you air so the next wave can hit harder. And you can feel that next wave coming because Nana's proximity to the Vuitton world keeps increasing. Whether she's chasing status or simply trying to anchor her lie to someone powerful enough that nobody will question her, Nana begins to orbit Vale's universe in ways that feel inevitable. It sets up this classic but effective triangle of truth and perception. The real Lily is quietly earning Vale's attention through integrity, while the fake Lily is presenting herself with confidence and polish, and the audience is sitting there thinking, oh no, this is the moment where the wrong person gets rewarded because the world loves the performance. That dread is a big part of the viewing experience. It's not suspense like who did it, it's suspense like how long can decency survive in a world that keeps punishing it. And right as Lily begins to believe, just a little, that her life could pivot toward something brighter, the story starts tightening the screws around her identity again, setting up an encounter that feels less like romance and more like the first tremor before an earthquake. That tremor hits in the form of a name spoken in the wrong mouth, in the wrong room, at the exact wrong time, because the story starts arranging its characters like matchsticks and then flicking the lighter. Nana edges closer to the Vuitton sphere with the confidence of someone who thinks the world is a costume party, and all she has to do is keep the mask on a little longer, and suddenly you get this scene that feels like pure oxygen deprivation. Vale hearing Lily Bennett introduced with perfect posture and a rehearsed smile, while the real Lily is somewhere nearby living a life that doesn't come with champagne glasses and flattering lighting. The show doesn't even need to over-explain why this is terrifying, your stomach does the math for you. Vale has been noticing Lily the worker, the one with tired eyes and quiet backbone, and now he's presented with Lily the socialite, the one who looks like she belongs on magazine covers and speaks like she's never been talked down to in her life, and you can see the confusion tighten around him like a tie being pulled too tight. And here's where the writing gets sneakier than people might give it credit for, because it doesn't make Vale instantly omniscient. He doesn't immediately go, aha, imposter. He does what people with power often do, he trusts the version of reality that's presented to him in the most convenient packaging. Not completely, not comfortably, but enough to make you feel that cold fear that Lily has been living with since she arrived in the city, the fear that the world will always believe the prettier lie. Nana, meanwhile, is performing at maximum volume, and it's fascinating how the show portrays performance as a kind of violence. She doesn't stab Lily with a knife, she stabs her with plausibility. She fills the air with details, with charm, with an ease that implies entitlement, and entitlement is persuasive because it makes other people assume you must have earned it. The tension spikes because Lily's greatest weapon, truth, doesn't sparkle the way Nana's act sparkles. Truth is awkward. Truth requires people to admit they were fooled. Truth asks them to care. And the show keeps returning to that bitter reality. People don't always want the truth, they want the story that makes them feel smart for believing it. So when the fake Lily and Vale share space, you feel the ground shifting under the romance you've been building in your head, because what happens if Vale is drawn to Lily's authenticity but still gets socially trapped by Nana's official identity? What happens if the very thing Lily needs, being seen correctly, gets blocked by how convincingly Nana can be wrong? There's a wicked moment where you can tell Vale is comparing them in his mind, not in a shallow way, but in that unsettled way where two different puzzles seem to have the same title printed on the box. The show uses small acting beats for this, a pause that's half a heartbeat too long, eyes narrowing just slightly, a hand lingering near a glass as if the sensation of it might anchor him. And Lily, when she's anywhere close to that, becomes this coil of restraint. She's not only afraid of confronting Nana, she's afraid of being labeled the jealous employee, the unstable woman trying to ruin someone's reputation. Because that's how these stories hurt you the most, they weaponize social stereotypes against the person who's already been harmed. Eldrick senses the chaos and, like any opportunist who feeds on imbalance, he finds ways to twist it into a direct threat. Suddenly Lily isn't just the worker he can push around, she's the worker whose existence is inconvenient, the one who might disrupt the nice clean hierarchy if she gets too close to Vale. So the pressure turns nastier, more personal. The show depicts that escalation with a kind of grim patience. Eldrick's tone gets sweeter while his actions get sharper, and that's the most realistic part. Abusers at work often don't sound like villains, they sound like professionals. They frame cruelty as standards. They call humiliation feedback. And Lily is forced to become bilingual in that language, learning how to respond without giving him ammunition, learning how to keep her composure while her insides are screaming. It's exhausting to watch in the best way, because it's the kind of exhaustion that makes you empathize on a physical level. You start noticing how often Lily inhales before she speaks, how often she waits a fraction of a second to make sure her face doesn't betray her. Those are survival habits, and the series makes them part of her character arc rather than just background texture. Meanwhile, the romance thread starts to twist into something more psychologically rich, because Vale's attention, once a lifeline, becomes complicated by the possibility that he might be fooled, or worse, that he might choose the lie because it's easier to integrate into his world. There's this subtle sadness that creeps in when Lily begins to wonder whether she is lovable only in the spaces where she serves, only when she is humble and convenient, while Nana is the version of Lily that society would proudly stand beside. That's not just jealousy, that's a wound about class and legitimacy. The story is basically asking, if you strip away the name, which version of a person does the world actually reward? The one who is kind, or the one who looks expensive? And the show visualizes that question with reflections, mirrors, glass doors, shiny surfaces that catch Lily's face for a second and then distort it, like the city itself can't decide who she is allowed to be. You'll notice how often Nana is framed with clean, symmetrical compositions while Lily is framed through clutter, through kitchen heat, through moving bodies, as if her life is always interrupted. It's not subtle, but it's effective, and melodrama doesn't need subtlety when it's aiming for the throat. And then you have the adoptive mother's thread pulling tighter, and this is where the story starts to feel like it's steering toward moral collision rather than just romantic complication. When she begins to suspect Nana's a Lily act, the show plays it like a parent sensing a fever. It's not about catching a criminal, it's about recognizing a spiritual wrongness, that eerie sense that your child is wearing someone else's skin. Her suspicion doesn't arrive as one dramatic discovery, it arrives as a pattern of tiny misalignments. Nana says something she wouldn't say if she'd lived Lily's life. Nana forgets a detail that should be impossible to forget. Nana's kindness looks performative instead of instinctive. And the adoptive mother, when she reacts, isn't portrayed as a perfect judge either. There's a heartbreaking reluctance in her, because to accept the truth would mean admitting she raised a daughter capable of this, and that kind of admission is its own devastation. That emotional complexity is what elevates the reveal mechanics. It's not just gotcha. It's grief. And Lily, caught between survival and justice, starts to change in a way that feels earned. She stops dreaming of a clean confrontation and starts thinking strategically about what it would take to reclaim her life without destroying herself in the process. This is where her evolution becomes genuinely satisfying. She starts choosing moments. She starts building quiet alliances. She begins to recognize that dignity isn't just something you protect, it's something you can weaponize if you know how to present it in a world addicted to appearances. And the show, to its credit, doesn't suddenly make her a master manipulator. She still hesitates. She still feels fear. But she's learning the difference between being passive and being patient, and that is a massive emotional distinction that a lot of dramas blur. Vale, at the same time, is being pulled in two directions, the corporate world that demands clarity and image, and the human part of him that is drawn to Lily's unpolished honesty. When he interacts with Nana as Lily, there's this faint stiffness, like his body doesn't fully believe what his eyes are seeing. It's the kind of tension that suggests he's starting to realize something's off, not because he's a genius, but because genuine connection leaves a fingerprint. Lily has left a fingerprint on him. Nana can imitate the name, but she can't imitate the specific gravity Lily brings into a room, the way she listens, the way she holds herself when she's hurt, the way she refuses to flatter. And I love that the series makes that the clue. It's not a conveniently dropped document, it's a feeling. The show treats emotional authenticity as evidence, which is cheesy if done poorly, but here it's actually thematically consistent. The whole story is about whether anyone will trust what feels real over what looks real. The pacing around this middle stretch is interesting because it deliberately toggles between pressure and relief, like it knows it has to keep you emotionally addicted. You'll get an episode or a sequence that's almost suffocating, Eldrick tightening the screws, Nana expanding the lie, Lily trapped in silence, and then the story gives you a quiet scene where Lily is alone, or where Vale speaks to her with unexpected softness, and suddenly you remember why you're invested, not because you want chaos, but because you want Lily to be safe. Those quiet scenes are filmed with a gentler rhythm, and the show often lets the sound drop away, no bustling restaurant noise, no social chatter, just the simple presence of two people trying to understand each other. And the best part is that Lily doesn't instantly melt. She doesn't become a different person just because a powerful man looks at her with warmth. Her guardedness remains, and that's respectful writing. Trauma doesn't disappear because romance arrives, it adapts. It learns new ways to protect itself. And there's this ache in watching Lily want to trust Vale while still being afraid that trusting him will give Nana another weapon. Because if Nana is pretending to be Lily, then any romantic movement Vale makes toward the real Lily creates a risk of misunderstanding, scandal, humiliation. Lily isn't just protecting her heart, she's protecting her identity from being rewritten again. That's why even the romantic beats carry tension, like the show is constantly whispering, "Don't relax, not yet." And in the background, the series is also doing something that resonates beyond the plot mechanics. It's tapping into a very familiar cultural anxiety about status and face, about the way society can value presentation more than reality, about how quickly people will side with the person who looks like success. I can't claim one universal reaction for everyone watching, but it's the kind of story that tends to spark intense feelings precisely because it mirrors real social dynamics, people arguing about whether Nana is purely evil or a product of a system that taught her worth is something you wear, not something you are, people rooting for Lily not just romantically but morally, because her struggle feels like a fight to be acknowledged as a full human being. And that's what makes the show's melodrama land. The exaggeration is built on real emotional truths. You might roll your eyes at a coincidence here or an overheard conversation there, but the core wound, being replaced, being dismissed, being forced to earn your own name, feels painfully grounded. As the story pushes forward, you can sense it preparing a bigger trap, because the threads are converging too tightly for it to stay in this simmering state. Eldrick's hostility is peaking, Vale's confusion is sharpening into suspicion, Nana's lie is getting riskier, and the adoptive mother's awareness is approaching that point where she can't unsee what she sees, and just when Lily finally gathers enough courage to step toward the truth out loud, the show positions her in a moment where one wrong word could make her look like the villain in her own life, and you can feel the air in the story thin, like everyone is about to inhale at once. There's this quiet corridor moment right after that exchange where you can feel oxygen return to the room, where Lily steps back into the flow of service and Vale stands still for a heartbeat longer than is strictly necessary, like he's tasting the afterglow of professionalism done right, and the film lets that small ripple travel. It doesn't shove them together, it lets them rotate in the same system while their lives keep happening. And that choice makes everything feel earned because attraction here isn't a lightning strike, it's weather shifting, pressure changes, subtler light, the sense that something's coming. What follows is one of my favorite early set pieces, a lunch that turns into a storm without raising its voice, a VIP table double-booked by accident, a sauce that breaks because a junior cook panicked, and Eldrick pacing the pass with a kind of restless math in his eyes, calculating bodies, minutes, and damage, and Lily, who technically has no authority, does this beautifully unglamorous thing. She steadies the team by doing what nobody wants to do, she refires the sauce and owns the error before it spreads, apologizing with precision to a server, plating in a way that disguises the redo, and the camera stays level with her hand so you see competence as cinema, exactly the sort of choice that tells you the director trusts craft to be charismatic. Off to one side, unseen by her, Vale watches, not with the intrusive gaze of a boss hunting for mistakes, but with the quiet pride of someone who believes people rise when you give them room, and yes, you can argue that's a fantasy in corporate kitchens. But the film isn't naive, it gives us the friction, too, Eldrick's clipped reminders about time, his refusal to let any single person become a hero, and the way he resists Lily's initiative not because it's wrong but because if one gear moves independently, the whole clock risks a skip, and that's genuinely insightful about power, how even benevolent control systems fear the exception. In counterpoint, we cut to Nana's orbit, and the tonal shift is masterful, music thinner, rooms wider, colors cooler, like her world was assembled for photographs, not people, and she's walking through them as a featured model wearing a life labeled Lily Bennett, memorizing facts like their lines, where she'd studied, who she knows, small histories polished until they shine and squeak when touched. And the film communicates her tension not through shaky cam or dramatic strings, but through tiny staging choices, a glass she grips at the stem so hard it leaves a crescent in her palm, a delay before she laughs along with someone else's joke, the way she checks mirrors for approval rather than appearance. At a networking event that looks like a modern temple, stone, glass, and egos, she gets cornered by a sharp-eyed socialite who asks harmless questions with weighted pauses, and for a breathless minute you think the mask will crack, but Nana rallies with a white lie so small you almost miss it, something about a childhood nickname. And it works only because the camera finds that heartbeat length of fear in her pupils and sells the relief as both victory and deeper trap, one solved contradiction. Buys her another hour in a life that's starving her of air. This intercutting moves like a heartbeat, Lily's rush of heat in the kitchen, Nana's cool rooms where silence is a knife, and as a viewer you start feeling the moral temperature of the film change. It's not asking you to decide who's right in a courthouse sense, it's asking where you place your empathy when survival strategies hurt the people they're supposed to protect, and that question lives in the pauses, in the way Lily glances at her phone during a break, thumb hovering over a contact she doesn't call, and in the way Nana rehearses "I deserve this" in the mirror like a daily vitamin. Performance-wise, the lead playing Lily does this thing with her spine, standing only as tall as a situation permits, never cowering, never puffing up, and you feel the stress pull between her shoulder blades after each micro-humiliation, like when Eldrick corrects her with a public note that feels personal, or when a customer assumes she's new and speaks to her like a child. And the movie lets those slights accumulate without melodrama because it understands the compound interest of subtle disrespect. By the time a hug comes later, you'll know exactly what that skin has braced against. Vale's interiority arrives in glances rather than speeches, which is a gift in a genre that often confuses romance with TED Talk. At one point he chooses to sit far from the floor chaos, near a window where rain prints the glass, and you get the unshakable sense of a man whose life has too many walls and not enough doors, which explains why Lily's no-nonsense steadiness hits like a door left open to clean air. The film earns his attention for her by showing him being careful with everyone, which is a subtle but crucial move. It tells us he isn't singling her out for sport, his note is someone who treats the world as seriously and kindly as he does when he's at his best. Eldrick continues to complicate, he's harsh, sometimes cruel, but when a new hire slices a finger during prep, he's the first to apply pressure and the last to stand down, and that matters because it reveals his ethos. Results are non-negotiable, but people don't bleed alone on his watch, and that paradox is what keeps him from being a punching bag for our disdain. The movie refuses to let you off the hook of hating him entirely because it knows how real workplaces blur lines between villainy and overtaxed stewardship. Sound design becomes a co-narrator, bathing scenes in truthful noise. In Lily's world, exhaust hoods breathe like dragons, the click of a pilot flame returning is relief, forks in a bathtub ring like coins, and the soundtrack only swells when the film wants to admit it's in love, otherwise, it sits back and lets work be loud. Nana's acoustics tell a different truth, shoes on marble, laughter that echoes because rooms are built for display, not togetherness, and the calm hum of air conditioning like the heartbeat of a building that never tires of being admired, and the movie uses those textures to keep you oriented emotionally without telling you what to think. Midway through the early stretch, there's a quiet, private moment where Lily stays late reading the staff manual like scripture, not because she needs rules to be human, but because rules might be the one thing in this place that don't gossip behind her back, and as she turns the pages under a flickering office light you feel the sincerity of someone who knows that competence can be a shield when fairness is slow to arrive. The first time Vale breaks CEO distance in a way that feels personal comes when he notices her outside during a rain burst, fumbling with a cheap umbrella that's half broken, and he offers a ride. The scene could have been a cliché, but it isn't because of how she declines, polite, firm, grateful, aware of optics without playing coy, and he doesn't push, doesn't insist, he simply nods with a look that registers boundaries as respect, and that's a rare bit of romantic discipline that makes whatever follows feel safer, a point the film underlines by letting the camera linger on their separation rather than their proximity. Meanwhile, Nana's web tightens, she gets invited into a circle where people speak in compliments that have expiration dates, and she starts to understand that the performance she's giving requires constant updates like an app, and the price of lag is exposure. There's a very smart scene where the mask forces her to betray her own tastes. She orders a wine she doesn't like because Lily Bennett was recommended as a fan of it once, and the displeasure that crosses her face is so microscopic and yet so devastating because it's the look of someone evicting themselves from their own palate. The film's thesis about identity turns crystalline here: live long enough as the version of yourself that's easiest for the room to accept and you'll forget how you like your food, your music, your company, and you'll confuse applause with love, a trap that's as common as it is cruel. Editing stitches these worlds with elegance, crossfades between a waitress's pad scribble and Nana's embossed invitations, cuts that map the rhythm of a blade against board to the click of stilettos in a hall, and it's not just pretty, it's meaning in motion, the way parallel lives echo and clash until a single note of truth would be too loud to bear. When the film wants to place a small bomb under your feet, it uses the adoptive mother like a tide. A voicemail slips into Lily's shift change one day, the voice tired but caring, and we sense history in the pauses, promises both kept and dodged, the faint creak of an old house where certain conversations have waited too long, and the way Lily delays returning the call tells you she knows that truth back home isn't a door you crack open, it's a floodgate. Through all this, the romance refrains from fireworks and delivers weather reports. You can feel front and pressure. You catch tiny drafts, Vale's employee-first policy in action when he intercepts a nasty complaint and instead of asking who to fire, he asks what process broke, Lily catching him moving chairs before a private event and the small shock of seeing a boss lift anything heavier than a glass, the kind of detail that says he's allergic to performative leadership, and the corresponding warmth in her steady nod that says she recognizes the real thing. There's a seed of conflict planted when a rumor begins to circulate that Lily got her placement at the Vuitton restaurant through an undisclosed connection, a rumor born of nothing more than that single conversation he had with her in sight of other eyes, and the way the film depicts this is eerily accurate, nothing overt, just a shift in temperature around her, a withheld smile here, an over-friendly question there, and Eldrick, to his credit, doesn't indulge it but also can't make it vanish. He can enforce standards, not hearts, and that reality hits like a cold splash because the movie respects how limited even good authority can be. Visually, one of the loveliest interludes comes when Lily rides the bus home at night, the window turning the city into streaks, her reflection ghosted over the street she's trying to survive, and she finally hits play on that voicemail, the adoptive mother's voice a blend of love and worry, asking her to come by, just to talk, no pressure, and her hand tightens around the phone while the bus rattles softly, as if the whole city is humming along with a decision she isn't ready to make, and that's the kind of grace note this film excels at, moments where plot remains still while character moves a mile. Just as gracefully, Nana gets her own breath, alone in a penthouse bathroom, glitzy light bars bleaching the color from her cheeks. She drops the performance for a minute and studies the face that's doing this dangerous job and whispers her own name, her real one, like a talisman to keep from sinking, and the acting here is exquisite in its restraint because you understand that behind all the bad choices is a person trying not to disappear, clinging to a single syllable as proof she still exists. Pace-wise, the film maintains a confident stride. If you're used to romances that dole out kisses like rewards, you might get twitchy waiting, but the payoff of patience is that by the time skin touches skin, it feels like a covenant, not a coupon, and in the meantime, the movie keeps feeding you the bread and butter of why these two people would choose each other: shared values, mirrored work ethics, matched appetites for quiet. On the subject of appetite, watch how food functions beyond props. A bowl of staff meal becomes a communion, a delivery of pastries is a peace offering, a perfectly clean station reads as a love letter to whoever takes over at next shift, and when Lily gets scolded for stepping beyond role boundaries to fix a service wobble, she accepts the note but doesn't apologize for caring, which is such a powerful, human moment. How many of us have learned the hard way that institutions will happily take our overwork but punish our overreach? The culture angle hums steadily, you feel a face-saving dance in meetings, the care with which directness must be delivered, the little nods to custom and season that thread through conversations, and the film never exoticizes any of it. It presents people being from where they're from and lets that be texture rather than topic. A standout middle beat has Vale visiting the kitchen after hours under the pretext of tasting a new menu idea. He's not scouting for Lily specifically, but of course she's there, cleaning down, and there's a warmth to the scene that isn't romantic yet but could be. the two of them exchanging a few words about consistency and trust while steam rises from a pot like the room is exhaling, and then he drops a line that could be corny in another mouth. Something about how the company hires for patience as much as skill, and it hits because the movie has shown him practicing that patience at scale, not just speaking it. When Lily later learns that the rumor about favoritism has worsened because of his visit, there's a sting. She isn't angry at him, she's angry at the mechanism by which proximity is misread as privilege, and she makes a choice to chop herself off from any hint of impropriety by volunteering for the least desirable shifts. A self-policing that's as heartbreaking as it is familiar if you've ever had to be twice as good to be thought half as worthy. On the opposite track, Nana begins to sense the ground softening under her shoes, a casual background character at one of her events, a driver she doesn't notice, recognizes her from an earlier life, and though nothing comes of it in that moment, you can feel the circle tightening. The movie respects the physics of lies. They don't explode immediately, they erode supports until collapse looks sudden but was really slow. Somewhere in this gentle spiral, Lily returns home to find a small package on her doorstep, an old apron from the adoptive mother, wrapped in paper with a note that reads like a hug without hands, a simple for your strength that lands harder than any monologue could, and she tucks it into a drawer as if storing up a bit of courage for later, which is precisely what the film is doing with us, stockpiling feelings so that when the reckoning arrives, you're ready to feel it right down to your bones. What I love is how the film uses tiny props as pressure valves, so after that quiet drawer moment with the apron, the next day turns into a kind of stress test no one planned. The restaurant gets hit with a surprise visit from a food blogger whose posts can tank reservations for a week, and the staff knows it the second a server does that barely perceptible posture change that says a person with influence just sat down. And you feel the stakes spike without a rolling timpani because the soundscape already has enough heartbeat in it, the rough breath of the line, the well-practiced yes, chef, the minute hand crawling toward peak hour, and Lily, who's been doing the penance of bad shifts and early starts like a saint with a stopwatch, has to decide whether to stay small or step into the gap where competence is needed. She chooses the latter, and the way the camera sits at her shoulder makes you feel complicit, like you're holding the ladle with her as she fixes a timing slip. With the sort of elegant salvage that audiences rarely get to see, re-searing a piece of fish, renovating garnish, whispering to a colleague with just enough clarity to be useful, never louder than the pride of the person she's helping, and when the blogger's post goes live later that night, an early draft that praises how the kitchen recovered from a hiccup with grace, it's another proof that the film believes goodness can be visible without being flashy. There's also a dream of a scene between Vale and Eldrick that proves this story isn't just romance, it's a lesson in leadership styles under duress, and they play it at a remove, like two chess players who respect each other's endgame but disagree on openings, and they argue without raising their voices about the difference between process and initiative, with Vale insisting that a system must leave room for humans to be excellent and Eldrick countering that excellence can't become a wild card that keeps others guessing, and that exchange could have been a dull policy talk, but the actors infuse it with the intimacy of old soldiers who've survived the same battle by different tactics, and that lets the film nudge you toward both empathy and frustration because it understands that a workplace isn't a morality play, it's a landscape of trade-offs. Meanwhile, out in the glassy universe of borrowed glamour, Nana's next test arrives as an invitation to a philanthropic gala with Vuitton branding splashed everywhere, and the way the movie introduces the event makes your stomach drop for reasons everyone involved would deny. It's the exact kind of high-visibility room where PR and personal mythology mingle, and if the gods of narrative are mischievous, the paths of our sisters will thread close enough for sparks, and the film leans into that dread by staging prep scenes as mirror images, Lily polishing steel and Nana choosing silk, both doing the unconscious ritual of readiness we all do before stepping into arenas where our value will be measured by strangers. This is also where the adoptive mother starts to move from voice to presence. She arrives in the city with a bag that has been repaired more times than anyone will admit, and the film shoots her entrance like a memory deciding to be a fact, letting the camera find her face before her context, which is a subtle way of telling us, this woman has been here, even when she wasn't on screen, and her role isn't to scold but to remember out loud, to carry the family's ledger of love and damage until someone else is strong enough to read it. And when she first sees Lily at the end of a shift, the hug is messy and long and filled with the kind of warmth that makes the audience into eavesdroppers on tenderness, and you can feel the movie letting that contact do narrative work that dialogue would bungle. She brings food, of course, something simple, something from before the forked path, and the way Lily eats it, perched on a stool in her tiny kitchen, eyes soft with relief, is one of those quiet truths the film exceeds at, an uncomplicated taste in a complicated life, and the mother watches her, not interrogating, just tallying the lean angles of her daughter's face with the practiced eye of someone who knows when a person isn't sleeping well, and later, in their shared calm, she mentioned seeing a social media clip of Lily Bennett at last year's event, Nana's performance, and the wordless way Lily freezes with her spoon halfway up tells us she didn't know which lie had traveled how far, and in that pause you feel the floorboards between them creak under the weight of what must be said. What the director does that's so sly is keep us on the edge of confession while still letting the engines of daily life run. Lily can't afford a breakdown, so she puts the truth on layaway and goes back to work, and the viewer can feel the discomfort of that delay because the film has taught us to value her integrity, and its temporary silence on this front feels like a wind you can't quite get out of your eyes. Nana, meanwhile, gets a stark lesson in the economics of proximity when a fixer attached to the gala offers her help like a cat drops a mouse, every word smiling, every sentence a trap, and the cost of that help is more alignment with a version of Lily that isn't quite hers to own, and what's astonishing is how gently the film punishes her. It doesn't send a lightning strike. It shows you a woman borrowing small amounts of herself until the balance is negative. Costume design deserves a shout here, not for peacock displays, but for how intelligently it tracks inner states. Lily's wardrobe shifts by degrees from borrowed ill-fitting blacks into pieces that look chosen, not handed down, and that isn't consumerist messaging, it's the visual language of a person remembering she's real, while Nana's textures become shinier and more reflective as if she needs the surfaces around her to prove she exists, and that choice is both stylish and loaded because it multiplies mirrors in her orbit. She cannot avoid the sight of what she's become. Cinematography keeps finding new ways to say the same moral. Truth sits in light like it's allergic to glare. The movie loves indirect illumination, lamps, late afternoon leaks through blinds, the blue wash from drink coolers, while the gala is lit like a jewelry case, every highlight crisp, every angle a flex, and when those worlds overlap visually later, your eye tells you the truth before a word is spoken. There's a low-grade tragedy brewing in the restaurant staff dynamic too. A colleague named Myra, who started the same week as Lily, begins to drift away from her in subtle ways that read like survival, fewer shared breaks, more time laughing with the people who seem powerful, and when she finally throws a comment like a dart, must be nice to get noticed, it's under a veneer of banter, but the sting lands, and the film doesn't judge Myra. It lets her be the one to say aloud what jealousy sounds like when it's trying to pretend it's a joke, a moment that's painful precisely because it's so ordinary. One evening, on the cusp of the gala, there's a small emergency at the restaurant, a breaker blows mid-service, and what unfolds is the kind of mini-disaster that reveals who's who without speeches. Eldrick becomes a literal flashlight, directing bodies with a phone between his teeth. Lily reroutes tasks with the skill of a conductor who knows each instrument's strength. Vale shows up not to hover but to ask the electrician the right questions and then get out of the way, and when the lights return and the room applauds by instinct, the movie allows itself one tiny joke. Lily claps, too, then catches herself and laughs, the relief human, the pride unguarded, and it is in that laugh that you sense Vale's restraint cracking just a hair, his not falling, his understanding. The mother, drifting through her daughter's new world with that uncanny maternal radar, picks up on undercurrents that would take outsiders months to notice. She eyes Eldrick with the same wary curiosity you reserve for strict teachers who probably know more about your child than you do, and in a small, brilliant beat, she thanks him for pushing Lily and adds softly that she hopes it's kindness that's pushing, not bitterness. And the look he gives her is something like a confession without words. For a second, he seems almost young, and you see the shadow of the person he might have been before the grind carved away his edges, and it's this sort of microscopic soul archaeology that elevates the film above soap. Everyone is excavated just enough to remind you we all started somewhere tender. The gala doesn't erupt into chaos because the movie respects the intelligence of its characters. It simmers like a pot left on low, with proximity doing the work of fate, and Lily ends up there not as a guest but as part of a small team delivering a late-night dessert installation, one of those modern pieces that look like sculpture and taste like patience, and the logistics are absurd: ice that melts, sugar that sweats, and inside. And the way the series stages that inhale is almost cruel, because it puts Lily in situations where speaking the truth doesn't feel heroic, it feels socially suicidal, like stepping onto a stage while everyone is already booing a character you haven't even played yet. One of the most nerve-wracking stretches comes when Lily is forced to exist in the same expanded world Nana has been enjoying, not as an equal, but as a shadow moving along the edges, she's there because of work, because of obligation, because the Vuitton ecosystem keeps pulling her in, and suddenly the lie isn't something happening over there, it's happening in rooms Lily can physically walk into. The show milks that discomfort with little details, the way Nana's laughter rings a bit too loud, the way people respond to her with rehearsed admiration, the way Lily's name gets spoken like a luxury brand while Lily herself is treated like staff. It's infuriating, and the series knows it, so it keeps cutting to Lily's face in those moments, not for melodramatic tears, but for that quiet, contained rage that almost hurts more because it's swallowed. And Vale is right there in the gravitational center of it all, watching, processing, recalibrating his assumptions in real time. You start seeing him do that thing powerful people do when their world doesn't make sense. He tests reality with small questions, careful observations, subtle probes. He'll ask Nana about something Lily once mentioned in passing, and Nana will answer smoothly but slightly off, like a singer hitting the note but missing the emotion. He'll notice the way Nana reacts to service workers, dismissive, entitled, while the real Lily, even when she's exhausted, treats people with a kind of quiet respect. Those aren't just character traits, they are tells. The series treats empathy like evidence, and it's slowly building Vale's realization not as a sudden plot flip, but as a dawning discomfort, the kind that keeps you awake at night because it means you might have been complicit in someone else's erasure. At the same time, Lily's workplace becomes a pressure chamber, because Eldrick begins to sense that Lily is reaching the end of her endurance and that something about her proximity to Vale is changing the math. He doesn't just want her to fail anymore, he wants her gone, and the tactics grow bolder, framed as mistakes and policy and performance issues in a way that feels sickeningly realistic. The show leans into that bureaucratic cruelty, and there's a sequence where Lily is put in a position where she can't win. If she defends herself, she's insubordinate. If she stays silent, she admits guilt. It's the kind of trap people who've never had a job like that might not fully recognize, but anyone who has ever been targeted at work will feel it in their bones. And what makes it emotionally brutal is that Lily's self-worth is already fragile from Nana's theft. Eldrick is basically trying to finish the job by making Lily doubt her competence, her sanity, her right to stand up straight. There's a moment where Lily's hands shake, just slightly, while she's trying to do something routine, and you realize the story isn't only about identity in the abstract, it's about the body's response to prolonged stress, about how humiliation takes up residence in you. But here's the thing, the show also starts letting Lily push back in a way that feels incredibly satisfying because it's not loud. It's controlled. She begins to anticipate Eldrick's moves. She becomes careful about witnesses. She chooses her words like armor. And there's this tiny but powerful shift where Lily stops pleading for fairness and starts behaving like a person who knows she deserves it, even if nobody else is acknowledging it yet. That shift changes how scenes play. Eldrick's digs bounce differently because Lily isn't absorbing them the same way. She still hurts, but she's no longer handing him her dignity. And Vale, watching this from a distance that is both protective and problematic, begins to show something like respect, not the romanticized "I will save you" respect, but the grudging admiration of someone realizing, oh, she's strong in a way money can't buy. The chemistry between Vale and Lily deepens not through grand dates, but through these charged, quiet interactions where Lily refuses to flatter him and Vale realizes he can't control her with status. There's a scene where he offers something that would solve a lot of her immediate problems, and Lily hesitates in a way that's almost painful to watch because you can see her wanting to accept, wanting relief, wanting someone to carry the weight for once, but she's terrified of being owned by gratitude. When she responds, it's not some perfect speech, it's a careful boundary. And Vale's reaction is the key, he doesn't punish her for it. He takes it in. He adjusts. That's growth, and the series earns it by letting him be uncomfortable without turning him into a villain. Meanwhile, Nana's side of the story begins to curdle. The life she's built on Lily's name starts demanding harsher payments. Maintaining a lie at that scale requires constant vigilance, and vigilance turns into paranoia. Nana becomes sharper, more reactive, more willing to hurt first. The show does something interesting here, it lets you glimpse the panic under her confidence, and it's ugly. Nana isn't just afraid of being caught, she's afraid of becoming nobody again. And because her whole identity has been built on being Lily, the threat of exposure feels like annihilation. So she doubles down, and doubling down in a melodrama like this means making choices that cross lines you can't uncross. The tension spikes when Nana starts treating Lily not merely as an obstacle, but as an enemy who must be neutralized, and you can feel the story darken a shade, because sibling betrayal hits different than any other kind of betrayal. It's not just, you lied. It's, you watched me suffer and you used it. And the adoptive mother, by this point, is no longer just suspicious, she's actively pulling threads. Her scenes become loaded with this quiet authority, the kind a parent has when they've seen enough life to recognize patterns of deception. She asks questions that sound casual but land like traps. She watches Nana's reactions like she's watching a crack spread in glass. And the looming emotional storm isn't only about Nana being exposed, it's about what that exposure will do to the family structure, to the idea of home. Because if the adoptive mother confirms the truth, she isn't just punishing Nana, she's admitting she failed to protect Lily in the most fundamental way, by allowing Lily's very name to be taken. That's why her eventual involvement feels like a moral turning point rather than a plot device. And Vale, pulled deeper into the chaos, begins to realize something else too: his company, his world, his people might be part of the machinery that's hurting Lily. Eldrick isn't just a random bad guy, he's a symptom of a culture that permits cruelty as long as profits look clean. So when Vale starts intervening more directly, it carries this sense of reckoning. It's not just romance-driven, it becomes leadership-driven. The show sets up the idea that love, if it's real, forces accountability, and accountability is uncomfortable when you benefit from the very system you're condemning. There's a stretch where the series seems to hold its breath around Vale's choices. Will he protect Lily privately and keep the system intact, or will he actually challenge what's happening under his roof and risk fallout? That question matters because it determines whether Vale is a fantasy or a character. And what keeps it compelling is that Lily doesn't wait around for him to decide her worth. She keeps moving. She keeps enduring. She keeps gathering the courage to speak her truth even when she knows it might backfire. The story is essentially tightening every thread until they're all straining at once. The workplace conflict is reaching a point of no return, Nana's lie is getting sloppy under stress, the adoptive mother is closing in, and Vale is finally close enough to the truth that he can't pretend he doesn't see it. And then the series delivers one of those scenes that feels like it's been building for a lifetime, where Lily is confronted, not with a villain monologue, but with a social moment that forces her to decide whether she will keep swallowing herself to keep the peace. It's the kind of scene where the room is full of people, the wrong person is being praised, and Lily's silence is being mistaken for agreement. You can feel Lily's chest tightening as she tries to choose the least destructive path, and the show drags out the seconds in a way that's almost unbearable, because it understands what's at stake isn't just a secret, it's Lily's sense of reality. And right when it seems like she might retreat again, right when you think she'll survive by disappearing, something shifts. Maybe it's Vale's gaze lingering with a new kind of doubt. Maybe it's the adoptive mother's presence feeling like a judge who's finally arrived. Maybe it's simply Lily reaching the edge of what a person can take, because Lily doesn't explode, she doesn't scream, but she starts to speak in a way that makes the air change. As if the story is finally letting the real name step out of the lie's shadow. That's wet. She comes face to face with a room where her name is a centerpiece, and the irony is not lost on the audience. You can feel the air go thin as the camera lingers on her eyes, scanning, realizing that somewhere in this crowd there is a version of her being served on a platter she didn't order. The mother attends too, invited through a community partner connection, and when her gaze finally catches Nana's across a crowded corridor, Nana dressed to the nines, laughter perfectly pitched, you might brace for operatic confrontation, but that's not the film's grammar. Instead, we get two women who love the same person recognizing each other in an instant of aching clarity, because Nana may be wearing Lily's lifelike couture, but the mother knows her outline, knows the way anxiety sits at the base of her neck like a knot, and what follows is a short exchange that burns precisely because it's courteous on the surface, a hello, a how are you, a pause as if both are considering whether they are about to set off alarm systems, and then a parting with eyes that say, we can't do this here. This restraint honors the idea that truth deserves a place with chairs, not a hallway. Vale, orbiting the event in that CEO way of being everywhere and nowhere, notices the slight tremor in the evening's perfection. The Whisper network receives new fuel, aided by the sight of Lily as staff while Lily is toasted as a patron, and he makes a call that we later understand as protective. he privately instructs his PR lead to focus coverage on the charity impact rather than personalities. A move that shrinks the aperture on scandal without erasing the underlying fracture, and this is where the film does a clever thing. It makes the ethical question bigger than romance. What is a brand's responsibility when personal truth is at stake, and can corporate kindness extend to protecting a person's identity without stepping into paternalism? The performances carry this knot with quiet discipline. Lily's face that night is a study in not letting heartbreak become someone else's entertainment, and Nana's is a mask that's starting to itch, and the mother's is the sore beauty of a person holding two children in her gaze and wanting to save both. Even in the thick of it, the movie keeps its tactile attention on food because that's where Lily's agency lives. There's a mesmerizing sequence where she torches meringue into topography and you watch rose gold peaks rise and think, someone built this, someone worthy, and it's an emotional counterbalance to the theft of her name. She is still the author of something undeniably hers. After the gala, the film lets us sit in aftermath of quiet rather than scandalous blow-ups. Lily walking home late, shoes in hand to spare the soles, city washed in post-event emptiness, Nana rinsing makeup off so thoroughly it looks like she's trying to erase the day, the mother folding that old apron on the edge of a hotel bed like a question mark, and in that hush, a resolve starts to coalesce on all three faces, different shapes for different hearts, and you can feel the story poising for a turn, not because the music swells, but because silence is doing that thing it does in this film, telling the truth, softly at first, then with the steadiness of a tide. So that tide of silence steps forward and becomes a choice, and the movie plays it at dawn because of course it does. Truth, when it finally decides to put on shoes, likes first light, so the adoptive mother asks Nana to meet her at a street stall that opens before the city puts its jewelry on, steam rising from kettles like a benediction, and the way the scene is framed, hard plastic chairs, tiled floor already damp, the world honest in a way expensive rooms rarely are, tells you what kind of conversation this will be, and the first thing she asks isn't why did you do this, it's what would you like me to call you today, a question that both breaks your heart and stitches it, because names here aren't just sounds, they're houses people live in, and Nana, who has been living in Lily's house without paying rent, falters and whispers her own. And that's the film's idea of mercy. Let a person say themselves before you ask them to answer for their choices. And even then, the mother doesn't lecture, she remembers, gently, out loud, how two girls once argued over the last fried dumpling, how one used to sign school books in careful block letters and the other scribbled hearts in the margins, how life didn't exactly hand either of them a fair map, and the edges of the scene hum with compassion even as stakes sharpen, because in that softness sits a clear deadline, it can't go on. This borrowing that bleeds the lender dry, and the mother says so without raising her voice, a line like a hand placed on a fevered forehead, if you cannot return what you have taken, I will return it for you, and in that single, quiet sentence the entire last act begins to breathe. Intercut with this reckoning, the film returns to the small theater of breakfast at the restaurant, the early shift alive with rituals, eggs meant to be runny, coffee meant to be blacker than night, and Lily moves through the routine with a steadiness that feels newly armored by that hug the night before. You can see her making choices to protect her heart without dimming her competence, like how she quickly redirects a server's misfire into a teachable moment with zero sting, and how she sidesteps a passing manager who wants to gossip by inventing a task, because sometimes the most radical act in a rumor climate is to be too busy to keep it alive. Sound sneaks in as storyteller again. The hiss of grill fat has a different timbre in the morning than it does at night, like it knows the day is still making up its mind, and piano keys nudge at the edges of the mix, a tiny motif that has always meant sisters showing up here as if to remind us that no matter how far apart Lily and Nana get, the film will not let them be alone in frame for long. Behind the scenes, Vale and Eldrick try to settle on a truce line that protects productivity and dignity, and their exchange lands in that sweet spot where good acting makes policy sound like poetry without lying about the paperwork. Vale proposes cross-training to reduce bottlenecks, a structural fix that means Lily's initiative won't look like mutiny because anyone could step into the gap by design, and Eldrick, perhaps surprised by how right that feels, absorbs it with the wary grace of someone who's learned that improvement sometimes come attached to loss of control, and the scene ends on a small, funny note. A timer goes off mid-debate and both men reach to silence it at the same time, fingers colliding in an awkward ballet that says, for all their differences, they care about the same ticking clock. The memo that follows, about boundaries, optics, the professional distance between floor and corner office, is a necessary evil that stings all the more because it reads like a wall being built specifically in front of a door. We've watched Lily and Vale approach slowly and carefully, and the film is savvy about how it shows the ripple when Lily reads it on her break, lit by the unflattering blue of a staff room vending machine. The camera stays on her face as she processes not just the content, but the intent. This is about safety, yes, but it also carries the subtle punishment of innocence under suspicion, and she breathes it in and decides to obey. Not because she's cowed, but because she knows that romance without mutual freedom becomes a trap, and Vale, for his part, receives the draft with all the appetite of a man chewing cardboard, then signs because he understands what leadership costs. Even when your heart wants to make exceptions, your responsibility is to set a standard that keeps everyone safe. Out in Nana's curated world, the cracks widen in ways that would play as melodrama in a lesser film but here register as sickly routine. A driver at a valet stand stares half a beat too long, a woman at the bar asks a question that only someone who grew up on the same street would know, and Nana dances around the minefield with a grace that comes from practice, not confidence, while the camera watches her edges fray, the way she massages her temples after smiling too hard for too long, the way laughter begins to sound like a cough. And then, because the movie believes in grace even as it sharpens the blade, it gives Nana a small, unadvertised kindness where she chooses not to exploit a situation she easily could. When a junior brand rep fumbles a presentation, Nana quietly slips her the right card under the table instead of letting her drown, and that flicker of decency matters, because it prevents us from filing Nana under villain and burns harder later when consequences come for a person still capable of being sweet. The adoptive mother, meanwhile, keeps moving like a tide, a force the city doesn't know it needs, visiting the restaurant again not to chaperone but to taste Lily's world, sitting at the counter with a bowl of staff soup at off-hour, complimenting the broth with that specific praise only someone who cooks can offer, enough salt to be brave, not enough to be showy, and Eldrick, to everyone's surprise, takes off his armor for a minute, confiding that it's been hard to balance discouraging gossip with not sounding like he's protecting a favorite, and the mother receives the confession like a professional listener might, then leaves him with a single line that feels like a compass: standards protect everyone, suspicion protects no one. It's around here that the film gifts us one of those civic love sequences I'm a sucker for, a Vuitton-sponsored community cook-off in a neighborhood center, the company doing something good not for PR clicks but because the calendar says it's time and the logistics wheels are already rolling, and Lily is there, hair pulled back, sleeves high, chopping vegetables beside aunties who know how to feed armies, while Vale floats in and out of the room doing the CEO thing of shaking donors' hands and making sure the outlets work, and the footage looks different because the color temperature is warmer, lights hung on cords, not recessed into white ceilings, and purpose saturates the air so thickly you can almost smell it through the screen. In the crush of plates and laughter, a community elder recognizes Lily's name, not from the internet but from a school drive years ago where a young woman with that name once helped with uniforms, and for a split second Lily tightens, bracing for a different kind of recognition, only for the woman to beam, "We remember you, dear," and pass her a bowl with the ease that comes from real memory, not curated myth. And that little moment is oxygen because it reminds Lily, and us, that her name was loved before it was stolen, that there are rooms where she is correctly seen, and the film uses this as a pivot to underline a theme it's been playing softly: the difference between fame and community. One knows your face, the other knows your story. The rumor machine tries to spin the event into further evidence: photos of Vale and Lily in the same frame, comments about proximity, and the movie smartly renders that noise not as a chorus we must listen to but as a buzzing you can tune out if you decide that the work in front of you matters more than the whispers behind you, and the way Vale positions himself in those shots, always just outside her orbit, says he's learning to protect her by reducing the optics burden, even if it means stepping back when closeness would feel better. After this touch of sunlight, we return to shadow. The mother invites both girls to a rented room above a convenience store, 4 walls, a table, 2 cups, and a pot of tea, as if staging a ceremony for unmasking, and the scene is a clinic in restraint: no raised voices, no shattered glass, just 3 women and the living history between them sitting down so history can change its tense, and the prop that carries the weight isn't a folder of documents, though those exist in her bag, the edge is worn by time. It's a child's drawing she's kept for years, 2 stick figures labeled in messy hand with both their names, one wearing a crown made of widely colored triangles, the other holding a spoon bigger than her head, and when she unfolds it on the table, the camera goes tight enough to read the jagged letters and you feel the past walk into the room and sit down beside them. Nana looks at it and something in her face breaks, not in a way that begs for pity, but in a way that finally admits that pretending to be Lily did not just borrow a name, it abducted a memory, and the mother, who has been endlessly soft, finally becomes iron gently wrapped in cloth. She tells Nana she has days, single digits, to come clean to the right people, and that if she doesn't, the mother will, not as an act of punishment, but of repair, because letting a lie stand is a kind of insult to both daughters, and the promise lands with the authority of a deadline you can't charm. The tension doesn't snap back into melodrama afterward. The film lets Nana walk the city in daylight, stripped of makeup and role, blending into the crowd she was so desperate to leave, and it's here that you start to root for her to make the hard choice, not because you want her punished, but because you want her free. Cinematically, this middle stretch is the film at its most confident. It trusts faces and elbows, hands on tables, the way light skates over teacups, to carry more narrative than most scripts dare, and it trusts us to read without subtitles the politeness of a culture that can hold truth without screaming it. A smaller beat worth celebrating, Myra, who had slid away from Lily toward the easier currency of gossip, overhears a trio of servers recycling the rumor with new embellishments and, in an act that feels tiny but heroic, simply says, "She earned today," refusing to be the megaphone they need, and the look Lily gives her later, a nod that includes both gratitude and boundary, feels exactly right. Reconciliation here is pragmatic, not sentimental, which aligns with the film's core honesty about labor. You don't have to love a colleague to refuse to harm them. Musically, the score evolves. Those tender strings we've heard since the beginning are joined, now and then, by a low, steady drum, less like threat and more like heartbeat you can hear because the world around has quieted enough, and I love that because it mirrors the way decisions feel in the body, not trumpet fanfare, but pulse rising a notch and then finding a new, sustainable rhythm. Between policy and feeling, Vale and Lily end up sharing fewer words and more glances, an economy that paradoxically makes each moment feel richer. There's a late-night inventory where they're in the same space on opposite tasks, an accidental synchronization where he stacks chairs at the same pace she folds napkins, and it's so chaste and so intimate it hurts, in a good way, because sometimes the thing you most want is not a kiss, but the proof that someone will match your tempo. And because the film refuses to make Vale saintly, it lets him misstep. He sends a carefully worded thank you to the whole team that too obviously avoids naming Lily's contribution, and while no one else notices, she does, and you can see the half-second of sting before she files it under the necessary cost of being above reproach, another tiny tax assessed on women's competence. And the movie keeps careful track of those taxes so that when relief eventually comes, we understand the refund. The visual palette keeps doing heavy lifting. Corporate spaces are now slightly overexposed, edges glowing in a way that reads as antiseptic, while Lily's micro-world, buses, markets, staff rooms, gains saturation as she stakes a claim to it, and Nana's environments tilt cooler still, like her life is being lit through a pane of ice. All of which culminates in a devastatingly quiet encounter in a mall escalator where Lily and Nana pass each other going in opposite directions, neither stopping, both registering, and the angle compresses the distance so their faces feel inches apart while their bodies are worlds away, a visual metaphor so clean you almost want to applaud. In a move that sidesteps cliché, the movie allows Vale and the adoptive mother to cross paths once more, this time because he returns a dropped bus card without knowing whose it is until she looks up, and the brief conversation that follows is polite to the point of anonymous. She thanks the stranger, he tips his head, but in that second, his gaze catalogues details he will recognize later when he learns who she is. And I admire how the film plays with recognition as a slow fuse, saving the explosion for when confession isn't just honest but useful. If you're watching for cultural nuance, keep an eye on how apology functions. Characters don't say sorry every time they feel it, they show it by rearranging their lives. Nana cancelling a lunch where she was scheduled to perform a lie, Lily taking an extra shift so a colleague can attend a family rite, Eldrick walking back a schedule change that was punitive in effect if not intent. And that active restitution reads truer than a dozen verbal mea culpas because it costs time, and time is this film's currency. Gradually, a path to confrontation begins to shape, not as an ambush but as a planned conversation with chairs, as the mother would have it, and the way the filmmakers signal it is through paperwork finally entering the frame, the ID tags, the staff rosters, the RSVP lists for the next Vuitton Community Initiative, documents that can act like mirrors if you force them to, and if you're alive to the motif, you'll feel the narrative's inhale tighten. We are days away from the name being put back where it belongs, and the question that steals your sleep isn't how will it happen, but who will bear the cost with the most grace. Those documents we felt humming at the edges finally take a seat in a small room with chairs, and the film treats the meeting like careful surgery, no theatrics, just 3 women, a couple of witnesses, and a flat table where truth can lie down and breathe, and it's the adoptive mother who sets the temperature by asking for the simplest courtesy first, water for the room, name spoken clearly, the drawing unfolded like a bridge between childhood and now. And then she does the bravest thing, she gives Nana the first right of speech and waits, and after a long silence that sounds like air conditioning pretending to be wind, Nana returns what isn't hers, an ID card, an access badge, a life she tried on because it fit better than the ache of her own, and the apology isn't a string of clever sentences, it's action, and the director leans into that by staying on hands, on the surrender of plastic rectangles and, finally, on Lily's finger steadying as she says the one thing she's been owed. Since the film began, I want my name back, and I want you okay, but not at my cost. The company's presence is quiet, smartly understated. HR listens with pens down, and Vale, whose authority could have filled the room like a weather system, keeps his voice narrow and precise, insisting that the correction be framed as just that, a correction, not a scandal, and that any public statement focus on clarity and respect rather than salacious detail. And for once Eldrick looks like a man grateful for a script he doesn't have to write, nodding not because he's cowed, but because he recognizes decency when he hears it. The revelation lands without fireworks and yet changes the gravity of every scene that follows. Internal records are corrected, press releases are calibrated with a medic's touch. Nana steps away from the room she occupied under false color and agrees to face the mundane consequences, returning a car she loved like a promise, resigning memberships, embracing the tedium of setting the record straight. And the film refuses to turn that into punishment porn, it renders it with matter-of-fact kindness, because if redemption is going to mean anything here, it can't be a spectacle, it has to be a choice repeated in daylight. Most importantly, the conversation with chairs continues at the mother's rented room with tea cooling in cups, where Nana and Lily finally do the thing we've been waiting to watch them do without an audience. They talk as sisters who've been failing each other in opposite directions, Lily confessing the stubborn pride that kept her silent longer than was wise, Nana admitting the sinking feeling that started the first time a stranger smiled at her for being Lily, and the way that smile became a drug, and the mother, equal parts priest and referee, allows tears but refuses self-pity, ending with that same gentle steel, love is here but it cannot carry a lie, and the hug that follows is messy in a way that feels entirely earned, no reset button, just an honest, bruised start. Where this movie really surprises, though, is how it handles the romance after the truth hardens into fact. Instead of letting catharsis steamroll caution, it honors the ethical mess that's always lurked in the corridor between Lily and Vale by letting them build a pathway that won't require them to sneak, so Vale recuses himself from her reporting line in a practical, boring email and pushes through the cross-training plan that anonymizes heroism, while Lily transfers to a sister property in the group where her promotion reads as deserved rather than blessed, and only after these small, adult steps do we get the permission for warmth, a walk after close along a quiet riverside where the city finally looks like a place for people rather than billboards, a pause where they talk about cooking their first meal together and both immediately agree it'll be in a kitchen with poor lighting and great company, her mother's, and then, at last, a touch that upgrades to embrace with the kind of calm that says this isn't a secret, this is a choice, and when a first kiss arrives, the film lets it land like a promise made under soft lamps rather than a fireworks display, which is exactly right for a story in love with work as much as romance. Even Eldrick's arc finds dignity in restraint. He never breaks into a grinning teddy bear, but he does start saying please and thank you more, the kind of evolution that would be invisible if you weren't watching closely, and in a quiet epilogue of his own, he attends the community cook-off not as an organizer but as a guy in line for noodles, compliments a volunteer's knife work, and you realize the film has let him take a step toward being a person outside his job, which for someone built of edges is basically a love story with himself. Myra's small redemption continues to echo, she becomes reliable without begging for forgiveness, and the script, bless it, knows that showing up on a day off to help with inventory is more convincing than 1,000 sorries, while Nana finds a path that neither glamorizes nor humiliates, after some distance and a handful of deeply awkward coffee meetings where she tells the truth before anyone can ask, she starts assisting at that community center kitchen, apron on, ego off, discovering the kind of visibility that isn't about being seen but being useful, and the camera, which used to shoot her in glossy mirror traps, finally frames her in matte, natural light, which is about as perfect a visual apology as I can imagine. On the formal side, the film's third act remains loyal to its earlier voice. The sound mix resists the urge to turn revelation into orchestral thunder and instead returns to its love of human noise, chairs scuffing, water boiling, laughter catching in throats, and the cinematography continues to split the difference between romance and documentary, with late afternoon golds in family scenes and glass and steel blues in corporate ones slowly bleeding toward each other until you can't quite tell where work ends and life begins, which of course is the point. That next life promised by the title isn't heaven or destiny, it's the life you claim when you stop curating yourself for other people's appetites. If there's a nit to pick, and there always is if you're paying attention, it's that one of the PR knots ties itself a little too neatly. A particularly nasty rumor disappears between cuts as if kindness alone can starve algorithms, but even that feels like a deliberate mercy in a story that is otherwise rigorous about consequence. The movie grants its characters one miracle and spends all its other capital on the hard work of choosing well. Performances seal the deal. The actress playing Lily conducts an entire symphony of feeling with micro-reactions, cheek muscles relaxing when truth lands, the little private smile of someone experiencing joy without needing witnesses, and the actor playing Vale navigates the tightrope of power with an almost old-fashioned restraint, letting charm arrive late and earned, while the mother is an absolute heartbreaker in the best sense, her patience never naive and her eyes carrying the weight of a ledger that records mercy alongside debt. And even Nana, easy to flatten into the one who lied, is allowed enough shading to remind us that most of us could, under enough pressure, become a version of ourselves we wouldn't recognize in the mirror. By the time we reach the closing montage, the movie has fully delivered on its promise. Lily in a fresh kitchen where her name is stitched onto a jacket that actually belongs to her, Vale attending as a civilian to taste a dish he didn't pay for with corporate funds, the mother bustling at a small table and bossing everyone around gently because someone has to, and Nana arriving late with groceries and no performance. All of them participating in a meal that feels like civic duty and private joy at once, and it's the sound that will stay with you, the clink of bowls, the soft chaos of shared spaces, a laugh that finally doesn't sound like it's working for tips. What lingers, too, is the film's stubborn belief that competence is sexy, that ethics can be romantic, that the slow work of telling the truth will eventually pay dividends in a currency you can actually spend, and that is a radical little theology in a landscape of stories that still sell shortcuts as dreams. As for where this sits in the year's slate, it's one of the few romances that remembers to be a drama of labor, and one of the few workplace dramas that lets love be more than a scheduling problem. It's a generous, confident piece of filmmaking that trusts us to find excitement in a properly tied apron knot, a well-timed apology, a bus ride where someone finally presses play on a message they've been avoiding, and yeah, a kiss that doesn't feel like a prize so much as a shared vow to make each other's days easier. By the end, I was moved not because the story surprised me, truth outs, consequences land, love finds good timing, but because it refused to insult me on the way there. It admitted how culture shapes apology, how class clothes lie in different fabrics, how names can be both armor and invitation, and it asked that old, unglamorous question most films are too shy to make their centerpiece: who are you when no one's looking? And do you like that person enough to live as them in public? That's my heartbeat level take, and if you've watched all the way through, you already know where I land. This is a tender, tightly observed, beautifully acted romance drama that earns every quiet tear and every quiet laugh it asks from you, and if you bring to it a little patience and a little appetite for honesty, it will feed you well. If you enjoyed spending time with me on this one, hit that like button to tell the algorithm this kind of deep dive is worth keeping alive. Subscribe to Scenecraft Review for more long, cinematic breakdowns just like this, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Did the ending satisfy you? Did the film handle the power dynamics with care? What would you have done in Nana's shoes? I read everything and I'm curious where you're watching from. Thanks for being here. Take good care of your heart and your stories, and don't forget to subscribe to Scenecraft Review and let me know your opinions in the comments before you go.